What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And in case you guys didn't know, the banks are closed on Sundays. Deontay Banks has been a shutdown cornerback for the New York Giants through the first 6 weeks of the regular season. Of course, their first round pick in this year's 2023 NFL Draft. They drafted him 24th overall, traded up one spot to get him, and so far looks like a great decision to go ahead and draft Deontay Banks. Now, if you were all listening to us or watching the show during our pre-draft coverage, you know that I was a huge Deontay Banks fan. I was very confident that he would step in and make an impact from day one, and he's done exactly that, and I'm super excited about it. So we're going to go ahead and discuss how Deontay Banks has performed so far this season, but before we do that, Justin Pugh was just signed to the active roster. Now, we know Justin Pugh, formerly of the New York Giants, 10 years ago, signed back with the team, played on Sunday Night Football admirably, I might add, went in there at left guard, had to move to left tackle. I read that the Giants were only planning on giving him 25 snaps in that game. He ended up playing 75 because of the pinch that they were in with Josh Azedu leaving the lineup. So you got to give a lot of respect to Justin Pugh for going out there. Hasn't really played football at all in a year, but he went out there and he performed. Maybe it wasn't the best performance, but considering all those factors, what a hell of a performance from Justin Pugh. And now he is signed on for the rest of the season, giving the Giants some much-needed depth to the offensive line. So we'll dive into it, discuss Justin Pugh, discuss Deontay Banks. But before we dive into all of that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about the way Deontay Banks has performed through the start of the season?
I'm doing pretty good, and, I want to hit on the Justin Pugh thing, so we'll get that out of the way, first and foremost. Justin Pugh, what he did against the Buffalo Bills was remarkable. I mean, yes, he gave up 3 pressures, 2 sacks, but had a couple penalties. But what do you expect? Not only has he barely played left tackle in his entire career, which spans, a lot of snaps, thousands and thousands and thousands, but he stepped in and was, competent. He played at a level that at least gave us a fighting chance. I think that he probably is our best left guard aside from Ben Bredesen right now, who's playing center. So he's the best alternative. And obviously getting signed to the rest of the 2023 season, I would love to keep giving him opportunities to play and start and get a lot of reps under his belt and maybe, keep him around for 2024 as well. It's really hard to come by competent offensive linemen, especially ones that have the leadership qualities that Justin Pugh has. He is a leader. He is a voice. He helps those guys gel. Yes, they looked not that good against Buffalo, but probably better than we've seen in weeks. And that was the 17th alignment we've had. And I think that his leadership qualities do help this line a little bit. When he is able to transition back to a guard spot, I think that's going to be a really good thing for the Giants. I think there's a world where he plays right guard for this team when Ben Bredesen is able to go back to his natural left guard spot and Evander Thomas ever returns. Josh Azudu's season might be over. I don't know what exactly happened with that toe, but Brian Daboll is still unsure, which means it's definitely a long-term injury. Obviously, the Giants went yesterday and got Tyree Phillips from the Philadelphia Eagles practice squad, and then Josh Miles from the Atlanta Falcons practice squad. Former 7th-round pick, I believe. Miles is not very experienced, has 24 snaps in his career. But of course, Tyree Phillips knows our system, knows our scheme. I could see him starting pretty soon. If not at right tackle, if Evan Neal, he didn't practice today. If he's out, Tyree Phillips is going to start there. If not, I could see Phillips playing left tackle and Pugh kicking back into left guard where he's more natural. So there is something to say about that. But Pugh, really big kudos to him. He's a little undersized. We saw him at the Tom Coughlin Gala, for Kids with Cancer. That was, and he was there supporting, and he's been here for a week, and he already showed up to an event like that. That just goes to show his character. Really great guy, really, really happy to do everything that requires of him. And ultimately, this is a guy I would like to keep around for maybe even next year, depending on how he performs the next couple weeks. So really liked that signing. I think that he deserved it. And of course, we don't have many other options, so we didn't really have a choice but to extend him for the rest of this season. Now, when it comes to Deontay Banks, guys, Banks is an exciting young player, right? He is really, really young. He's a freak athlete. And he's been excellent this year for the most part. 22 years old, guys. 22. He's given up 120 yards this season across 295 snaps, including 165 in coverage. He's had some really lockdown numbers against some really good receivers, and he has a 52% reception rate allowed. 52%. That's tremendous. The average quarterback probably has a 63, 64% completion rate. He's allowing a 52% completion rate against him. Now, yes, he's missed a couple tackles. He's been a little bit spotty in run defense at times, which is a part of his game game that I think will get better over time. But he has the elite makeup speed. He's been really, really solid for the Giants up to this point in the season. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts on him because, we've seen him lock down some good receivers. We've seen him, they're not targeting him. And like usually if you're an opposing team, you're trying to go after those rookies. You're attacking Banks, Hawkins. Like you want to really expose them. And teams aren't attacking Banks like that. Like they're not going to his side very often. In fact, I think they've been attacking Adoree Jackson more than they have Banks at times, which is really surprising. So, I want to hear your thoughts on that and really how you think he's performed up to this point in the season.
Listen, it hasn't been perfect for Deontay Banks, but it's been exceptional, okay? I know that the PFF grades are not necessarily perfect. I think he's got a pretty low grade, but when you're looking at the way that he's playing and the competition that he's facing, what more can you ask of a rookie? It's not very often that rookie cornerbacks are thrust into the starting lineup to be your primary guy, your CB1. Deontay Banks is doing that. Now, he wasn't expected to do that. We talked all offseason long about how Deontay Banks finally gives the Giants a solid CB2 because Adoree Jackson would maintain his spot as CB1. Well, Adoree Jackson has really struggled this season. It's pretty clear and obvious that the Giants won't be extending him this upcoming offseason. I don't think that would be a wise decision at this point. I think he's a little bit washed up. And that's a shame to say because I love Adoree Jackson, and I think that he played so admirably last season, especially in the playoffs against Justin Jefferson. That was a lights-out performance from Adoree Jackson. We were hoping to see more of the same this season. We haven't exactly seen that. His production has fallen off a cliff. He's been beaten consistently in coverage, whether he's in the slot or on the outside. So now you put your rookie cornerback in a pretty tough position there because Deontay Banks has to be your primary cornerback in place of where Adoree Jackson was meant to be. So a difficult situation that Deontay Banks has found himself in, but he's risen to the occasion. He's not getting beat. He's not letting up an influx of touchdowns. And one of the things that's been so impressive for Deontay Banks so far this season is when you watch him, or when rather pre-draft, everybody was saying this is an elite man coverage corner. This is a guy that is just going to sit there and shadow receivers and play man-to-man. He's been awesome in zone coverage so far this season. And I think he's a big reason why Wink Martindale, I think over the past 2 weeks, has gone to a more zone coverage heavy scheme. Now, Wink Martindale is usually pretty evenly split, a lot of man coverage. If you're evenly split between man and zone coverage, you're running a lot of man coverage because most teams are probably at around 60 to 70% zone coverage. Wink Martindale is usually pretty evenly split, but the last couple of weeks here, we've seen him take a more zone-heavy approach and kind of peel back that man coverage scheme that he was running through the first 3 weeks that was really shredding the Giants apart. And I think the reason that he's able to do that comfortably is because Deontay Banks has just been so great locking down one side, one portion of the field in zone coverage. If you really watch Deontay Banks closely, you see the way that he communicates with the other defensive backs on the field, is calling out where to be, and he's always scanning and checking out where to go. Like that week 1 play against the Dallas Cowboys, that breakup that he had in the end zone, that was a zone coverage play, and he was not even in his zone. He got out of his zone to make a big-time play, and we've seen him do that on a number of occasions so far this season. So we're going to, of course, dive into some of the competition that he's faced, Alex, and he's faced some extreme competition, a gauntlet of elite wide receivers through this first portion of the season. But on top of that, I just think that Deontay Banks has been so impressive, not just shadowing these receivers, but staying put in his zone and making plays on the ball. I've just been blown away with his presence on the football field for the New York Giants this season. Now, this is something I expected. Like I said, I wanted him in the first round. He was my mock draft pick for the Giants in the first round of this draft. So I knew that he had these abilities. I knew he was an elite zone coverage cornerback as well as a man coverage cornerback. I did a deep film study on him, but just to see him pick it up so quickly in his rookie season is what's got me blown away. Because again, I was expecting him to have a lot of rookie growing pains, and trust me, there have been some rookie growing pains for Deontay Banks, but I was expecting it to be a lot more of a struggle CB2 season for him. But the way that he's had to just play CB1 for the Giants and he's gone out there and played it well is just so damn impressive. So Alex, how are you feeling about that? The fact that, Adoree Jackson, not the same player anymore, and you're watching Deontay Banks just kind of ascend himself into the CB1 role. The Giants are putting so much pressure on him and asking so much of him, and he's just really been rising to the occasion.
I mean, look, this is what we drafted him to be. Like, getting CB1s in the 24th overall pick, right? Is that what we got him? 25th overall pick? That's it's hard. It's not easy to do 24th, right? So it's not easy to do, especially because there was a lot of corners that went ahead of him. He was disregarded by some of those top teams or teams that had higher draft selections than us. we end up with Deontay Banks hoping that he can be that athletic freak that molds himself into a versatile player, and he's done just that. And some of his numbers, I know, Danny, our graphics mastermind over here, posted a great graphic detailing his stats against some of the top receivers that we faced so far. So, Brandon Cooks, 2 targets, 0 receptions. Deebo Samuel, 4 targets, 2 receptions allowed, 13 yards allowed, and had a pass breakup. 1 reception allowed on 9 yards allowed against Tyreek Hill. 3 targets, 1 reception allowed, 0 yards against Jalen Waddle. Stephon Diggs, 3 targets, 0 receptions allowed. I mean, he stepped up against some of these really, really great talents, and that's what you expect from top corners like this. Now, I anticipate that he's going to be that CB1 next year. Now, I don't think the Giants are going to let him go. I don't think they're going to let Adoree go and not replace him. I think they're going to go out and sign somebody, maybe someone with some upside, maybe someone that fits their scheme. I do have faith that they will reinvest that money. Look, Adoree Jackson's a $19 million cap hit this year. If they take that and invest 12 or 13 into a good CB2, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be in good shape. You have Hawkins still developing. You still got Cordell Flott, who actually looked pretty good against Buffalo. You have some good talent here that, I do think has some developmental upside. And maybe the Giants do draft another cornerback in the mid-rounds next year, maybe second or third rounds. It's never a bad idea to continue adding talent to the cornerback room at all. So I do feel like that's a good idea. At the same time, Banks is a little bit thin. I do think that he might add a little bit more size to his frame so he can get a little bit better as a run stopper on the outside. Teams have been attacking the Giants on the outside, notably the Miami Dolphins. They were running that outside zone a lot, and they were just attacking the corners, attacking those outside guys and beating the crap out of us. So I do feel as though we could stand to improve in that regard. But look, if that's our weakest link, I think we're okay. Like if our weakest link is just outside zone runs and, we can stop it after we figure it out. Miami is just doing it to everybody, right? Like David Achane and, Raheem Mostert, they've just been unstoppable this season. So I'm not going to sit here and act like they haven't been kicking everyone's ass. But for the Giants, the future is bright in some of these spots. Right? The defense looked excellent last week. We saw their potential. We saw their upside. Micah McFadden's getting really good. Bobby Okereke's a stud now. Banks has looked solid. McKinney's having a decent comeback after a couple of weeks of a little bit inconsistent play. He's been pretty solid lately. Jason Pinnock has had a good year. Dexter Lawrence remains a monster. Now we do need more pass rush. So that's kind of where my focus starts to turn in terms of instead of bringing back Leonard Williams, Anthony, I think that I'm more on board with taking that $32 million cap hit, taking maybe half of that because that's still a lot, 16 mil, if not a little bit more, and going out and getting a really good edge rusher in free agency. That might be my priority. Maybe trying to get someone in the second round, but I can't trust Azeez Ojulari anymore. I know a lot of people are on the same boat as that now. I've come around, beginning of the season, I thought it was still too early. Now I'm kind of in the boat of he's injury prone. So what are your thoughts on that? Taking some of that money from Adoree, Leonard Williams, you're collectively, adding $19 million and $32 million in cap hits. Where are you going to spend that money? Let's assume you're going to use it on the defense. What positions are you kind of allocating that toward? Maybe splitting it up between a pass rusher and a cornerback, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, while I advocate for getting those numbers off the books, I do think it's time to move on from both Adoree Jackson and probably also Leonard Williams. I think you could argue Leonard Williams still has a place on this team and should stay for another season or two, but his cap hit is just monstrous. So while I do agree with kind of getting those guys off the books, I feel like you also leave ginormous gaps at both of their positions by getting rid of them, and you have to take the money that you get from getting rid of them and just reapply it to those positions. If you're letting go of Adoree Jackson, you're freeing up cap space by doing that, you have to immediately reinvest that stuff back into the cornerback position. And the same goes for Leonard Williams. We talk a lot about how great Dexter Lawrence is, and I know Dexter Lawrence is a truly elite talent on his own, but he does benefit from having a great defensive lineman alongside him in Leonard Williams. Now, is Leonard Williams worth the price tag? No. But also, Bobby Okereke is benefiting from having 2 great defensive linemen in front of him. We looked at the film breakdown yesterday, Alex, and there was a lot of gaps that opened up for him because Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence were doing their jobs, working their assignments, and creating those rushing lanes for Bobby Okereke to shoot. In the past, the reason the Giants' run defense has been so bad is because Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams would open those gaps, and then Tay Crowders, the likes of Tay Crowders and those other linebackers wouldn't be able to shoot those gaps, make their run fits, and get those run stops. But now they actually have a linebacker who can do that. So it's almost like Leonard Williams has even more value than he's had in past seasons just because he's working in tandem with Lawrence and working in tandem with Okereke to really create a good defense here for the New York Giants. So I am a little bit hesitant to get rid of Leonard Williams. I think that he is a player that I would probably consider bringing back for the right price tag. But if you're talking about getting rid of those cap hits, getting them off the books, you just have to reinvest that money right back into the cornerback and defensive line spot. In this Wink Martindale defensive scheme, it is super important to have those defensive linemen up front to open up those lanes for the linebackers who make the plays. And right now, we're confident that the Giants have two solid linebackers for at least the next 4 seasons, right? Micah McFadden and Bobby Okereke. We feel good about that duo, but they're only going to be as good as their defensive line in front of them is, right? It's the same that we talk about your quarterback and your running back are as good as the offensive line in front of them. It's the same thing for linebackers with the defensive line in front of them. So if the Giants do decide to move on from Leonard Williams, free up some cap space, I do think they go back out there and not necessarily invest it into a pass rusher, but just into another damn solid defensive lineman, a run-stuffing defensive lineman who has a little bit of versatility to pass rush as well, kind of a Leonard Williams-esque player. I think you just have to find the younger, cheaper version of him to develop in that spot, free up that cap space, but you do need a player like Leonard Williams in this defensive scheme. I think he is, and his skill set in this scheme is completely necessary. Now, there's something to be said about developing mid-round picks at the defensive line spot. I like Jordan Riley, 7th-round draft pick. He hasn't been playing, though. He's been a healthy scratch in numerous games this season. I'd like to see the Giants try and get him on the field, develop his skills. I mean, Brian Dable just said, like yesterday, the only way that you develop your young wide receivers like Jalen Hyatt is by getting them on the field and making them play more, and Wan'Dale Robinson as well. Well, he's applying that to Wan'Dale, and he's applying that to Hyatt, but he's not applying that to Jordan Riley. I'd like to see Jordan Riley start to get some playing time so that we know whether or not the Giants have something competent here on the defensive line to develop before we go into next year's draft and just draft a guy and pretty much just push Jordan Riley onto the practice squad. That would be a shame to see. So it'll be interesting to see how the Giants attack this, but we know they added a lot of depth on the defensive line. They got Nacho, they got A'Shawn Robinson. Those guys have been impactful because they're solid depth, but they're not solid starters. The Giants still need to find a solid starter, so I could see them taking a defensive lineman pretty early in the draft next year within the first 4 rounds and hopefully developing a long-term starter there. And also at cornerback, I know Trey Hawkins, like I love the game that he brought all preseason long. He's clearly not ready for the NFL game right now. He's been struggling immensely through the start of the season. He needs more time to develop. I think that this is a player who probably catches on at the end of year 2, maybe year 3 in Trey Hawkins. Probably continues to dominate in practice, but in terms of going up against everyday NFL starters, he probably needs at least another year under his belt. You guys got to keep in mind, Trey Hawkins is coming from a small school in Old Dominion. I don't think any player really has made a significant long-term impact in the NFL out of Old Dominion. O'Shane Ximenez, I think, is the other one who came out of Old Dominion and actually started for several seasons, for better or for worse, for the New York Giants. But when you're looking at that, the cornerback position, it's thin. Cordell Flott is not a guy I rely on. He's always injured. Aaron Robinson is an afterthought at this point. The Giants are going to be finding themselves drafting a cornerback high again this offseason unless they go out there, take the money from Adoree Jackson, and reinvest it into another solid veteran. So kind of my long-winded rant and thoughts on that, but I just think those two positions are really crucial to the success of this defense. So while I do want to free up that cap space so the Giants have more money to work with in the offseason, I think they're just going to end up freeing up that cap space at those positions to reinvest it right back into those positions because they are so crucial to the defensive scheme. But of course, we'll see. I think they also have to hit on those draft picks. That's something that Joe Schoen's made it a point, hit on those draft picks and continue to build this defense through the draft.
I mean, look, I'm just looking at the free agents next year, and there's a lot of really good players, actually. In the cornerback realm alone, Adoree's, 28 years old, but you could go after some a little bit older guys on really short-term deals and just, smooth over the spot until you get some more youth into there. Like, for example, you have the guys like Stephon Gilmore, there's Chidobe Awuzie. He's also 28 years old. Emmanuel Mosley. Like, there's some decent veterans here that could make an impact. Steven Nelson. Outside linebackers, though, dude, are really, there's flush with outside linebackers. Like Daniel Hunter, Jerome Baker, Za'Darius Smith, Leonard Floyd, Josh Allen, Rashawn Gary, Bud Dupree, Montez Sweat, Josh Uche. Like, there's so much talent at the outside linebacker position. I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants invested a little bit there to pair with Kayvon Thibodeau on the outside. But yeah, I do think that maybe there's a world where we see Leonard Williams come back on a cheaper deal.
Me too. I just think he's really impactful and he's super valuable to the success of this defense. So if they can afford to bring him on to a cheaper deal, I think he's worth bringing back. And we know that he doesn't intend on leaving. He doesn't want to leave New York, and he wants to continue playing alongside Dexter Lawrence, and Dexter Lawrence feels the same way. So I think that the Giants should make it an effort to bring him back and continue to play him alongside Dexter Lawrence. Now, one of the names that you mentioned there, outside linebacker, does stand out, and it's Danielle Hunter, because that's a player who I could see perfectly fitting into this defense, combining alongside Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think that makes Kayvon Thibodeaux a better player to have a truly established elite veteran pass rusher on the other end. But with Hunter, what really excites me is the idea of reuniting him with Andre Patterson, the New York Giants defensive line coach. Now, we know when Dexter Lawrence started getting coached by Andre Patterson, we saw Dexter Lawrence hit an elite level, and we know that Andre Patterson has just coached many defensive linemen and pass rushers up to that level before in the past in Minnesota. And now with Andre Patterson here coaching the Giants defensive line, if they were to make the trade for Danielle Hunter, I think that would be a match made in heaven. Or maybe not even the trade. Maybe you go ahead and you try and get him in the offseason, whatever the case might be. But Danielle Hunter would be the top player that I think the Giants would want to target. He does want out of Minnesota. Minnesota is keen on moving him. That would be the splash move of the offseason, in my opinion, for the Giants. But that's if he doesn't get traded at this deadline. He might get traded at this deadline, get sent to a place like Chicago or some other random spot across the NFL, and then you're talking about Danielle Hunter not being an option for the Giants. But there's plenty of options out there. Like you said, a lot of edge rushing talent, and the Giants do need to add depth at that position, or arguably need to add another bona fide starter at that position who's not a young guy developed, but really just somebody established. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see how the Giants attack their offseason, but it's such a long ways away. Right now, I'm focused on the fact that Deontay Banks is playing great football. I'm really excited about that. And I'm also thrilled that Justin Pugh is back. I've always really liked Justin Pugh. Thought he's been a solid player for the New York Giants in the past and across other teams. And now he's back for the rest of the season, hopefully providing much-needed depth on the offensive line. Meanwhile, defensively, Deontay Banks shut down cornerback. We know that the Giants still have a ton of good wide receivers to face throughout the rest of the season. We haven't even played Philadelphia yet, and that's probably the most stacked wide receiver room in the NFL right now. But I'm really curious to see how Deontay Banks holds up against the likes of A.J. Brown and Devontae Adams once we get to those final games at the end of the season against Philadelphia. But a lot of football left to play. Giants are 1-5. It's not too great, but silver lining, Deontay Banks has been a great cornerback as a rookie for the New York Giants so far. So, of course, we're excited about that, but we want to know how excited all of you are about that down below in the comment section. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.